Arrival on Earth. Zix Snack stood in the bustling hangar of the Galactic Interchange Hub, a massive structure floating in neutral space between several star systems. His smooth, iridescent skin shimmered with faint hues of purple, blue, and green, reflecting his nervous anticipation. His 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a Gloron reflex whenever stress began to overwhelm him. "Stay calm, Zix," he muttered to himself, his voice a series of clicks and hums that only his species could understand. "You're the first Gloron to be part of this cultural exchange program. You've trained for this." But no amount of training could have fully prepared him for Earth. From the moment he was briefed, the planet seemed like a death trap. Toxic atmosphere, contaminated water, violent, unpredictable species, and yet, somehow, billions of humans thrived in this environment. Professor Kel CLX, the head of the Intergalactic Cultural Exchange Program, had reassured him countless times. "Humans are strange, yes, but they are survivors," the professor had said. "You'll learn much from them, and they from you." The intergalactic shuttle's door hissed open, pulling Zix from his thoughts. His heart, or the Gloron equivalent, raced as the voice on the intercom announced their final descent toward Earth. He swallowed a lump of anxiety, his tentacle-like appendages quivering with anticipation. The first sight of Earth's atmosphere filled the viewport, an enormous sphere of swirling clouds, blue oceans, and vast patches of green. It looked beautiful, deceptively serene, but Zix knew better. This planet was far more dangerous than it appeared. He tugged at his protective suit, custom designed to keep Earth's hostile environment at bay. His skin absorbed nutrients and oxygen directly from the atmosphere of his home planet, but here, on Earth, he would rely on technology to survive. As the shuttle descended into Earth's atmosphere, Zix's disguise was activated. His holographic mask shifted his appearance to resemble that of a human teenager, a species he had only studied from a distance. 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs, and no tentacles. The concept of being so, limited in movement, felt confining, but this was necessary. He couldn't risk standing out too much, at least not at first. He took a deep breath, careful not to draw in too much of Earth's air. The professor's warnings rang in his head. "Their atmosphere is corrosive to us. Prolonged exposure without proper protection could lead to severe oxidation." The shuttle's door opened, revealing the bright light of day. Zix shielded his eyes, adjusting to the natural sunlight of Earth. His landing spot was discreet, a small, secluded area near Earthville University, the institution where he would spend the next several months as a foreign exchange student. He stepped out, and the first thing that hit him was the weight. The gravity was much stronger than what he was used to. He staggered slightly, but managed to regain his balance. 2.5 times our standard gravity, he reminded himself. "You'll adjust." The shuttle departed, leaving Zix standing alone, bathed in the warm sunlight of Earth. It was strange, this sensation of being so far from home, on a planet where everything could potentially kill him. But he was here for a reason, and he had to focus on the mission. He pulled out the small device tucked in his pocket, his survival manual. It had been custom-made by the Gloron scientists to help him navigate human society, their environment, and their cultural intricacies. The first entry blinked on the screen: "Do not drink the water." Zix let out a sigh. "I'll miss Gloron's water." He began walking toward the university, feeling the unevenness of Earth's terrain beneath his feet. The buildings loomed in the distance, large and imposing, yet strangely appealing in their design. He could see humans walking to and fro, their mannerisms and body language so different from the calm, slow-moving Gloron lifestyle. As he approached, he felt a new sensation: eyes on him. 2 human students had spotted him from a distance. He knew he looked human, thanks to the disguise, but still their gaze made him uncomfortable. He adjusted his posture, trying to mimic the way humans walked, something he'd practiced on the shuttle but wasn't entirely confident about. "Blend in," he whispered to himself, "just another human." The humans passed by without incident, though one of them gave him a curious glance. Zix's skin, though hidden beneath his disguise, rippled slightly, a sign of his unease. First day of classes. Entering the campus was like stepping into an entirely different world. The buildings were vast and modern, yet they had an organic feel to them, with plants and greenery integrated into the architecture. Humans walked in every direction, some hurrying, others standing around in groups. Zix had read about this. Humans tended to form social clusters, particularly in educational settings. The challenge was figuring out how to navigate these clusters without attracting too much attention. His first class was Introduction to Human Biology, a subject he'd been both curious and apprehensive about. The human body was fragile, far more vulnerable than a Gloron's, yet somehow they managed to survive and even thrive in environments that should have killed them. It was both fascinating and terrifying. As Zix entered the lecture hall, he spotted an empty seat near the back and quickly sat down. The room filled with human students, their conversations buzzing around him like a swarm of insects. He did his best to tune them out and focus on his notes. The professor, a tall human with graying hair, entered and began the lecture with a discussion on cellular structure. Zix found himself enthralled. He'd learned about Gloron biology in his youth, but human cells were an entirely different matter. The way they produced energy, the way they replicated, it was both primitive and genius at the same time. The lecture continued, and Zix made careful notes, his mind racing to keep up with the new information. But there was a constant undercurrent of fear. What if he made a mistake? What if he slipped up and revealed that he wasn't human? Toward the end of class, a human student sitting next to him turned and introduced himself. "Hey, I'm Jake. You're new here, right?" Zix blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the directness of the question. Yeah. First day," he replied, careful to keep his voice steady. "Nice man. I'm a second year, so if you need any help, just let me know." Jake smiled, his expression open and friendly. Zix forced himself to smile back. "Thanks, I'll keep that in mind." As Jake turned back to his notes, Zix felt a strange sense of relief. His first human interaction had gone smoothly. Maybe, just maybe, he could pull this off. A dangerous encounter. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, but Zix couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place. He had survived his first day, but the real challenges were yet to come. It was late afternoon when Zix decided to explore the campus grounds. He wandered past the library, the sports fields, and finally, the cafeteria. The smells wafting from the building were unlike anything he'd experienced before, strange, yet oddly enticing. Food was another challenge. Glorons absorbed nutrients through their skin, but here, he would have to eat like a human. He wasn't sure how his digestive system would react. As he approached the cafeteria, he heard a commotion. A group of students had gathered near the entrance, and at the center was a human boy, tall and broad-shouldered, who seemed to be causing trouble. Zix observed from a distance, not wanting to get involved, but then he saw something that made his heart race. The boy grabbed another student, smaller and clearly frightened, by the collar of his shirt. The larger human shoved him against the wall, his voice raised in anger. Zix's instincts kicked in. On Gloron, such behavior would be unthinkable. He knew humans could be aggressive, but seeing it firsthand was jarring. Without thinking, he stepped forward. "Hey!" Zix's voice, louder than he intended, cut through the crowd. The larger boy turned, glaring at him. "What do you want?" Zix's mind raced. He wasn't prepared for this kind of confrontation, but he couldn't stand by and do nothing. "Leave him alone," he said, his voice surprisingly firm. For a moment, the larger boy stared at Zix, clearly sizing him up. Then, with a snort, he let go of the smaller student and walked away, muttering something under his breath. The crowd dispersed, and the smaller student looked up at Zix with wide eyes. "Thanks, man," he said, his voice shaky. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in." Zix nodded, his heart still pounding. "No problem," he said, trying to sound calm. but inside, he knew he'd just taken his first real step into the chaotic world of human life. As he walked back to his dorm, Zix couldn't help but wonder, was this just the beginning of the dangers he would face on blending in? The early evening light began to fade as Zix made his way back to his assigned dorm room. His encounter with the aggressive student still replayed in his mind. The idea of such open hostility was strange to him. On Gloran, disputes were settled through logic and mediation, not physical confrontation. Humans, it seemed, were far more volatile. When he entered his room, the door slid shut behind him with a faint whoosh. Zix exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the day's events press down on him. The room was small by Gloran standards, with a simple bed, desk, and chair, but it was comfortable enough. He activated his holoscreen, a Gloran-designed communication device disguised as a human tablet, and keyed in a message to Professor Kel Clax, his advisor and guide during this mission. Zix, first day complete. No major issues, but humans are unpredictable. Encountered aggression. Managed to diffuse situation. Blending in seems harder than anticipated. He sent the message and waited for a response. Moments later, the professor's voice crackled through the device, his tone as calm and measured as always. Professor Kel Clax. Unpredictability is part of the human experience, Zix. Their society is chaotic, yet it has a strange way of self-correcting. Continue your observations, but be cautious. Avoid direct conflict if possible. Zix nodded to himself, closing the device. The professor's words were reassuring, but the situation he found himself in was still unnerving. His thoughts shifted to the other students he had encountered, the humans who had passed him in the halls, the friendly Jake who had introduced himself in class, and the hostile boy who had bullied another student. It was a strange mix of behaviors, all existing within the same species. Glorans were far more homogeneous, with strict social rules that kept order in their interactions. Here, though, it seemed anything could happen. Adjusting to human life. The next few days were a blur of classes, campus exploration, and awkward attempts at social interaction. Zix's disguise held up well, and most humans seemed to accept him as one of their own. He carefully observed their mannerisms, speech patterns, and social dynamics, making mental notes of the things that puzzled him. He noticed how humans placed a great deal of importance on appearance, something that was nearly irrelevant in Gloran society. The way they dressed, styled their hair, and even how they walked seemed to convey subtle messages that Zix was only beginning to understand. He tried to mimic these behaviors as best he could, adjusting his disguise to fit in more seamlessly. Jake, the student who had introduced himself on the first day, turned out to be a valuable resource. He invited Zix to sit with him during lunch, introducing him to a group of friends. Zix was careful to say little, instead focusing on learning from the humans around him. Their conversations ranged from casual topics like movies and sports to more serious discussions about their classes and future plans. One afternoon, as they sat in the campus courtyard, Jake turned to Zix with a grin. "So, where are you from, anyway? I mean, you've got kind of an accent, but I can't place it." Zix's mind raced. He'd been prepared for this question, but answering it in a convincing way was still a challenge. A small town. Kind of far from here, he said, keeping his response vague. Jake nodded, seemingly satisfied. "That makes sense. You don't seem like a city kid. It's cool, though. You're adjusting pretty well." Zix smiled, relieved that his lie had gone unnoticed. The more time he spent with humans, the more he realized how important it was to remain inconspicuous. His mission wasn't just about learning from them, it was about not being discovered. A strange invitation. One evening, as Zix was preparing for bed, his holoscreen buzzed with an incoming message. It wasn't from Professor Kel Clax this time, but from Jake. "Jake, hey man, we're heading to a party tomorrow night. You should come. It's gonna be fun." Zix stared at the message for a moment, unsure how to respond. He had read about human social gatherings, parties as they called them, but the concept seemed overwhelming. Large groups of humans in close proximity, engaging in unpredictable behaviors, often involving the consumption of strange substances. It was a risk, but also an opportunity to learn more about their culture. After a moment's hesitation, he replied, "Zix, sure, I'll be there." The next night, Zix found himself walking toward an off-campus house with Jake and a few of his friends. The air was cooler now, the stars barely visible through the light pollution of the city. As they approached the house, he could already hear the loud music thumping from within, accompanied by the sound of human voices raised in conversation and laughter. Jake nudged him with an elbow. "You'll be fine, man. Just relax, have fun." Zix nodded, though his insides were coiled with anxiety. He activated a small device in his pocket that monitored his vital signs, ensuring that the atmospheric levels around him remained within safe parameters. The last thing he needed was for his disguise to fail in the middle of a crowded human party. Inside, the house was packed with students. The lights were dim, and colorful decorations hung from the ceiling. Humans danced in the living room, their movements erratic and wild. Others stood in small groups, talking and laughing, while a table in the corner was covered in cups filled with brightly colored liquids. Zix had read about these substances, alcohol, a common intoxicant among humans. He made a mental note to avoid it. Jake disappeared into the crowd, leaving Zix to navigate the party on his own. He wandered through the house, observing the interactions between humans, trying to understand the social dynamics at play. They seemed to be enjoying themselves, but their behavior was erratic, shouting, laughing, moving in unpredictable patterns. As he passed by the kitchen, a group of students caught his attention. They were talking in hushed tones, their expressions serious. Zix slowed his pace, his curiosity piqued. One of them, a tall girl with dark hair, was holding a strange device, small, metallic, with glowing blue lights. It didn't look like anything Zix had seen in his research on human technology. "We found this in the woods behind the university," the girl was saying. "It's not from here. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely not human-made." Zix's heart skipped a beat. His mind raced. Could it be a piece of alien technology on Earth? He had been warned that there were other extraterrestrial visitors on the planet, though most were careful to avoid detection. But if this device was from another world, it could be dangerous for both humans and any non-human species living among them. He edged closer, pretending to inspect a nearby table as he listened to the conversation. "We should take it to someone," one of the other students said. "Maybe a professor or—" "No way," the girl interrupted. "If this is alien tech, we don't want anyone else getting their hands on it. Not yet." Zix's pulse quickened. He knew he had to find out more about the device. If it was indeed alien technology, it could expose him, and any other extraterrestrial life forms, if it fell into the wrong hands. But how could he get close enough to inspect it without raising suspicion? He needed a plan. The discovery. The next day, Zix couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious device. His mind raced with possibilities, each more alarming than the last. He had to act quickly before the students did something reckless. After classes, he approached Jake, trying to sound casual. "Hey, do you know those students from last night? The ones talking in the kitchen?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, why?" "I overheard them talking about some kind of weird device they found. I'm curious, what do you think it is?" Jake shrugged. "No idea. I didn't hear anything about that. Maybe it's just some prank." Zix tried not to let his frustration show. He needed to find out more, but without drawing too much attention to himself. If this was truly alien technology, it was his responsibility to ensure that it didn't endanger anyone, human or otherwise. As night fell, Zix made a decision. He would track down the students who had the device and figure out what it was, no matter the risk. He knew the stakes were higher than ever now. One wrong move could expose him, and his mission on Earth could come crashing down. The hidden threat. Zix spent the next day discreetly following the students who had been talking about the device. They were a small group, 3 in total, led by the tall girl with dark hair, whose name he discovered was Emily. She seemed to be the one in charge, the others deferring to her judgment. Zix observed them from a distance, careful not to draw attention to himself. Later that evening, he watched as they headed toward a wooded area behind the university, exactly where they had claimed to find the strange object. Zix followed cautiously, staying far enough behind to avoid suspicion, but close enough to keep track of their movements. The sun was setting by the time they reached the edge of the forest, casting long shadows across the ground. The group moved swiftly, disappearing into the trees. Zix hesitated for only a moment before following. The forest was dense, with tangled branches and thick undergrowth that made it difficult to move quietly. His enhanced senses allowed him to track the humans easily, though, even as they ventured deeper into the woods. Eventually, they stopped in a small clearing. Emily crouched down, pulling the metallic device from her backpack. The others gathered around, their faces illuminated by the faint blue glow emanating from the object. Zix edged closer, his heart pounding in his chest. From his vantage point behind a tree, he could see the device more clearly now. It was sleek and alien in design, with markings that Zix recognized instantly. Gloron symbols, faint but unmistakable. His mind raced. The device wasn't just alien, it was Gloron technology, something that should never have been left on Earth. But how had these humans found it? And what were they planning to do with it? "I told you it's not human," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This thing is from another world. We need to figure out what it does before anyone else finds out." Zix's stomach churned. He had to intervene. If they activated the device, it could reveal his presence, or worse, it could trigger something dangerous. But confronting them directly was too risky. He needed a way to disarm the situation without blowing his cover. As he considered his options, Emily stood up, holding the device in both hands. "We're going to run some tests," she said to the others. "See what kind of energy it's giving off. Maybe we can figure out how it works." Zix's heart skipped a beat. He had no time left. In that moment, a plan formed in his mind, risky, but the only option. He would use his limited access to Gloron technology to remotely disable the device, rendering it inert before they could activate it. But he had to act fast, and without raising any suspicion. He stepped back from the clearing, hiding behind a large tree as he pulled out his holoscreen. His fingers moved quickly, entering a series of commands in Gloron code. The screen emitted a soft glow as it interfaced with the hidden tech inside the device. Zix watched the group carefully as he worked, hoping they wouldn't notice any changes. Suddenly, the device's lights flickered and dimmed. Emily frowned, tapping it lightly. What just happened? One of the others leaned in closer. "Maybe it's malfunctioning." Emily's frustration was clear. "Damn it. We need to figure this out." Zix breathed a sigh of relief. The device was safely deactivated, at least for now. But his mission had just become far more complicated. The presence of Gloron technology on Earth posed a threat not only to his own cover, but to the delicate balance of interspecies relations. As the group packed up the device and prepared to leave the clearing, Zix knew one thing for sure: he would have to stay one step ahead of them if he was going to protect both his people and the humans. The hidden threat was far from over. The final confrontation. The days that followed were tense. Zix kept a close eye on Emily and her group, who were growing more determined to uncover the device's secrets. They had moved their operations to an abandoned warehouse near the outskirts of town, where they could work in secret without prying eyes. Zix knew he couldn't let this go on any longer. He had successfully deactivated the device, but it was only a temporary solution. If they managed to repair or reactivate it, the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for him, but for Earth as well. The device, as Zix now suspected, was some kind of forgotten weapon or beacon. It had the potential to send out a signal that would alert other alien species to Earth's existence, opening the planet to threats far beyond what the humans could imagine. One evening, Zix received a message from his superiors back on Bloron. The message was clear. He was ordered to retrieve the device at all costs. It was too dangerous to leave in human hands. But he also had to avoid exposure. If the humans learned that aliens were living among them, it could destabilize the entire planet. Zix couldn't afford any mistakes. That night, Zix made his way to the warehouse. He had his holographic disguise active, but his Gloron equipment concealed beneath his human appearance. The air was thick with tension as he approached the dimly lit building. He could hear the low hum of machinery inside. The group was working late. Zix slipped through the side entrance, moving silently through the shadows. He spotted Emily and her friends gathered around a table in the center of the room, the deactivated device lying in front of them. They were tinkering with it, clearly trying to restore its power. Emily leaned over the device, carefully examining its inner workings. "We're close," she whispered. "I can feel it. Just a few more adjustments." Zix clenched his fists. He had to act now. Stepping out of the shadows, Zix raised his voice. "You need to stop." The group spun around, startled by his sudden appearance. Emily narrowed her eyes, recognizing him immediately. "Zix, what are you doing here?" "I'm here to protect you," Zix said, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "That device, it's dangerous. You have no idea what you're dealing with." Emily frowned, stepping forward. "How do you know about this? And why should we trust you?" Zix hesitated. He had hoped to avoid this, but there was no turning back now. He had to reveal the truth. "I'm not who you think I am," he began, his voice heavy with the weight of his confession. "I'm not human. I'm part of a species from another planet. Gloron, that device you found, it's from my world, and if you activate it, it could destroy everything." There was a long, stunned silence. Emily and her friends stared at him, their faces a mix of disbelief and shock. Zix felt his heart race, wondering if they would even believe him. "You're joking, right?" one of the boys said, his voice shaky. "This is some kind of prank." But Emily wasn't laughing. Her eyes were locked on Zix, a mixture of curiosity and fear in her gaze. "Prove it," she said quietly. Zix nodded. Slowly, he deactivated his holographic disguise. His human appearance flickered and disappeared, revealing his true form: 4 eyes, rippling skin, and the slight glow of his alien physiology. The group gasped, stumbling backward in shock. "Oh my God," one of them whispered. He's real." Emily took a step forward, her eyes wide but steady. "Why didn't you tell us before?" "I couldn't," Zix replied. "If anyone found out, it could have led to a disaster. My mission was to observe and blend in, but now things have changed. That device, it's a beacon. If you activate it, it will send out a signal to the rest of the galaxy. And trust me, you don't want the wrong species knowing about Earth." Emily glanced down at the device, her brow furrowed. "So, what do we do now?" Zix stepped closer, his voice firm. "You let me take it back. I'll return it to my people, where it can be safely destroyed. You can't keep this here. It's too dangerous." There was a moment of hesitation. The group exchanged uncertain glances, clearly conflicted. Emily, however, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. She turned to the others. "We have to trust him. This isn't just about us anymore. This is about keeping Earth safe." With a reluctant nod, the others stepped back, allowing Zix to approach the table. He carefully picked up the device, feeling its weight in his hands. The danger had been averted for now. As Zix prepared to leave, Emily spoke again. "Will we ever see you again?" Zix paused, turning to look at her. "I don't know, but I'll always be watching. You've done the right thing, Emily. Remember that." With those final words, Zix activated his holo disguise once more, blending seamlessly into the night as he disappeared from the warehouse. His mission had taken an unexpected turn, but for now, the threat was contained. As he made his way back to the university, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of attachment to the humans. They were curious, resilient, and capable of incredible things. And despite their flaws, Zix had grown to admire them. But one thing was certain: the universe was far larger and more dangerous than they could ever imagine. And Zix would be there, in the shadows, to ensure they remained safe from the dangers.